Hey, what's up, everybody? So, I hope you've enjoyed my real life stories this past week where I've talked about being kicked out of the house at 15 years old, moving into a project community at 18. Hope you like to keep your bitch in check. That was crazy. And now I kind of want to talk a little bit about the last three real life stories that I've done because I kind of missed some things and I omitted some things because it's just still too, even all these years later, it's still kind of touchy to me. So, I'm naming this video is failing as a son, and I actually really did fail as a son, and I still beat myself up over this. So, but the one thing that I wanted to talk about from my first video, the being thrusted into life at 15 years old, was I mentioned a little restaurant named Birdie's, and it was in Bel Air Plaza where I used to work at both Publix and Winn-Dixie. And this place, Birdie's, unbelievable. I just got to mention this, and they have they had the best sausage and gravy ever. I mean, they would do it on Sundays, and I would ride my bike up there first thing, and there would be a line of people down the sidewalk waiting to get into Birdie's. And it was owned by this little old lady, and her name was Birdie. And I'm sure she's long gone by now. I mean, she'd have to be probably 100 years old, but who knows? I mean, people live that old now, so Birdie still could be rocking inside of a restaurant. But yeah, she was a nice old lady and older lady, and they had the best sausage and gravy. They would take the Jimmy Dean sausage patties and just chunk them up and put them in the gravy. And they would give you the choice of flaky biscuits or regular biscuits. Well, they used to, but I think they stopped doing that. But I used to get the flaky biscuits because I just love those. Birdies. I had to mention that. So because I had to give a shout out to Birdies because they were an amazing little restaurant, and it was just in Bel Air Plaza, kind of hiding off in the corner beside the bowling alley, and that place is amazing. I think they were only open for breakfast and lunch also. I think that's the only time they were open. So now I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to apologize in advance if I get all emotional on you and start bawling like a baby, because I still kind of beat myself up over this on what happened. The whole situation of me just, I was a stupid kid, and I can't stress that enough. I was a stupid kid. I mean, I didn't get in trouble. I never got in trouble with the law or anything like that. I just made dumb, freaking boneheaded decisions. All kids do, but I reaped, I, I was, yeah, anyways, I reaped the rewards from being stupid. So, but I can't stress enough. I was a stupid kid. And I had an amazing childhood. And I mentioned that in being kicked out of the house at 15. I had a great parenthood. I mean, I had a great two parents. My mom and dad were awesome. And, I just did dumb stuff, I mean, and I ended up hating my parents over it for no reason. I mean, granted, yes, looking back at it, I think my dad could have done things differently and not just given me an envelope full of money and saying, "Welcome to life, kid," and dropping me off at a friend's house. And I didn't see my parents from 15 and a half years old till I was over 19 years old. So there was, a period of over 3.5 years where I didn't even talk to my parents. I didn't even want anything to do with them. I had talked to my grandmother. Like I mentioned, I was really close to my grandmother, and she passed away in 1999, and that was hard too. And because here's another thing. Nobody talks about death. Nobody talks about death at all. And the first time that I ever experienced death, I think I was about 9 or 10 years old when my uncle Barry died. And, I remember being there, sitting there in this funeral home, and everybody's like crying. And I'm just sitting there going, what is up with this? And then I remember going up to, because my Uncle Barry, we used to go fishing with my dad and Uncle Jim, and they would all go fishing. They were all fishing buddies. And so I remember my dad taking me and my brother. Yes, I have a brother. I don't mention him too often, but I do have one. He's younger than I am by a couple of years. And I remember my dad taking my brother and I up to the coffin because it was open casket. And I remember my dad just standing there, and my dad got emotional, but I was like, I just wanted to play outside. I didn't care about this. I didn't even understand what was going on, and death is just not talked about. So that was the first time that I ever experienced it. And I don't know how I even got on this, but like I said, I had a lucky childhood, and I loved my parents a lot. My mother did so much for my brother and I. My dad did so much. Like I mentioned, we never went without anything. We always had food. We always had electricity. We never not had a roof over our head. And I had friends all around me that their parents were just fighting. And man, I had a friend, Sean, that lived behind me. His mother and father fought so bad. He was like, his father was 7 foot tall. His mother was like 5 foot tall, little Mexican lady. And she would just beat him up for no reason. She wasn't a drinker, nothing like that. She was a high school math teacher, very smart, but she would just beat her husband up all the time. And I would hear and see this. I'd stay over at his house, and all of a sudden I hear him saying, don't hit me, stop hitting me. And it was just great. I never had to deal with that as a kid. I was so lucky. I had such a great childhood. So, here it is. I'm like 19 years old and haven't talked to my parents. And I'm starting to think, well, I should probably talk to my parents. They're getting a little bit older. My grandmother's getting older. I should talk to her more because I was so close. I failed miserably as a son and as a grandson, just all around. And I just ignored everything. That's how I ignore it. That's how I just deal with stuff. I just shut myself out and I just ignore everything. And I just go into hiding. And that's just how I've always dealt with stuff, because I've always been solo for the most part in my life. And that's just how I personally deal with things. But everybody deals with their situations their own way. And that's how I deal with mine. And my grandmother, man, I keep thinking about those biscuits and gravy. And so I talked to my grandmother, and she says, yeah, you really need to talk to your mom and dad. And I said, why? What's going on? She would not tell me, because she wanted me to talk to them. And I finally, here I'm like 19 and a half, going on 20. And so I went over to the house. I didn't call them. She gave me their number. I didn't call them. This is before cell phones, by the way. Well, no, I'll take that back. There were cell phones, but they were the size of a suitcase, and they were like $50 a minute. And yeah, it just wasn't, logical. It wasn't as it is today. So I stopped by my parents' house, and it was empty. And that was like the first red light going, what the hell is going on? I didn't know if they moved or what. So I called my grandmother, and I said, they're not home. I said, nobody's home. I said, the house is empty. She said, well, so she gave me their address, and they were living in an apartment. And I'm going, what the hell is going on? So I got the address, and I went over to, and I knew where this place was. It was not the best apartments. It definitely wasn't. I'm not going to name the name of it, but it was in Titusville. So I went to their apartment, and there was my mom's car, and there was my dad's truck, and I knew this is the place. And I sat there for probably 15 minutes contemplating, do I want to go up there and do I want to knock on the door, or do I just want to go home? And actually, I pulled out and I was driving away. And then I said, no, I need to do this. I need to know what's going on. So I drove back around and pulled in, got out of my car and knocked on the door. So now it's going to start getting pretty hard. So I apologize in advance. So I got out of my car. I knocked on the door. My mother answered the door. My mother, I've always loved my mother, and she saw me. She started crying. I mean, she just started bawling. And then in turn, I started bawling. And, I gave her a big hug, and the first words out of my mouth was, I'm sorry. And so my mom, said, don't stand out here all day, because it was kind of raining a little bit. So my mom had me come inside, and my dad was in the living room sitting down, and my dad just didn't look right. And, I said, Dad, how's it going? And he didn't say nothing. And my mom said that he's having a hard time talking right now. I said, well, I'm sure he probably is, because I haven't seen him in 3.5 years. And she says, no, she said, your father had a stroke. And I guess about 6 months prior, my dad had a bad stroke at work, actually. And so he was all messed up. One side of his body wasn't working good. He was having a hard time with everything, and and then he saw me. He started crying, and it was just a big cry fest. And it was hard. And it's like I still beat myself up over this, because and I'm trying not to get too emotional here, but it's kind of hard not to, But come to find out, my dad had everything always under control, financially, everything. And he took all of his pension, his life savings, everything, and tried to pay the house off. And he put all this money towards it, and then he ended up never getting his Social Security or anything like that, or disability. And then he ended up losing the damn house anyway. And, he was able to sit. His truck was already paid off by this point. And he paid my mother's car off, because she had got a new car. She had gotten a new Hyundai. So he was able to pay that off, but immediately I'm thinking, holy crap, I failed, because I was making great money at the time. I was managing at Winn-Dixie. I was making over $50,000 a year at 19 years old. And I could have saved our house. I literally could have saved it, And I beat myself up for a long time. And in fact, I still beat myself up over this, because something that my dad paid 20 years on, or close to 20 years on, lost. Friggin' mortgage companies, they don't care. They're legal loan sharks. With interest rates and bank interest rates, it's a joke. It's gouging. It's like, how can these companies get away with all this compounded interest and everything? And it just, they don't care about you. They don't care about your family. They have all these stupid commercials and, oh, we care about you. No, you don't. It's like my dad religiously pays his house off for 20 years, and then they won't give him any help at all. And then at the first, these sharks just swarming around his bloody body in the water, just waiting to just strike and take everything from him. And that's what they did, those sons of bitches. And, I won't ever finance anything. I haven't financed anything. I don't like banks. I don't like anything like that. So because of that, just because of, what happened to my father. And I could have saved him if I would have just not been the idiot that I was in I hate my parent mode for 3.5 years. And if I would have kept contact with him, I could have saved it. And I didn't. And I failed as a son. I was a horrible son for 4 years. And like I said, I still blame myself for it. I mean, my mom was running herself on the ground, taking care of my dad, working overnights at Walmart, working another job at a floral place during the day. My dad didn't have any social security. They didn't have anything left. I mean, they were living in this crappy 2-bedroom apartment, and they lost their house, their prized possession that my dad paid 20 years on and put so much money into it and invested it and had all those gardens and all this other work shed and everything else. And he lost it all. And I blame it on me because I could have saved it. But yeah, so I did good. I didn't cry too much. I got a little emotional there, but like I said, I failed as a son, and I wanted to, and my son asked all about our family and stuff, and we talked, and I told him about what happened to me at 15 years old. He couldn't believe it. And we took a little road trip I think it was on a Saturday or Sunday, and we took a road trip to Daytona Beach. I took him by the Daytona Speedway and showed him that, and he was amazed on how big it was. In fact, I've never even seen a race. I'm not a NASCAR fan, so I'm not into driving in left-hand circles. So, but I mean, it's a demanding sport, though. I'm just not into it. So I took him everywhere. I took him to where I used to ride my bike. I took him to show him where I used to work in Bel Air Plaza, and I took him to the bowling alley. We actually bowled a little bit, and Birdie's was still there. And yeah, it was they were closed though, but yeah, it was awesome. And then I took him over. I used to live on a street called Wild Olive. It was either Wild Olive Avenue or Wild Olive Street. And it was like the first street off of Main Street where, all the bars are, the bikers and, man, Bike Week. That was when I first moved to Daytona. It was like a week before Bike Week. And then I'm like going outside to get my bike to go, to ride around. And there's just motorcycles everywhere, drunk people passed out in the house yard that I used to live at. I mean, it was crazy. Bike Week is just unbelievable. And I actually kind of walked around, and man, it was just topless chicks everywhere, and dudes and like assless chaps and all this other stuff. And that's where I got the idea to have my little jester, my little NPC jester that would appear from time to time, sort of like Q from Star Trek, right? And he would be an assless chap. So I would always tell my players he had like these magical assless chaps. But yeah, so I took my son to Daytona, and we were on A1A, and I took a left. I remember coming off of International Speedway and then taking the first left, and Wild Olive Avenue was not there anymore, but there was I think it was like a bar and grill. I don't know, Lobster Shanty, or I don't know. I can't remember. This is years ago. But Wild Olive Avenue was like gone. And a couple other streets were on, and the little Chinese laundromat that was there, where I learned how to do laundry, and where I found out about Chinese food, Mugu Gai Pan. That was because when I went in there for the first time, I said, I've never had Chinese food before. And she said, oh, you like Chinese food? And I'm like, I've never had it. And I asked her what was good. And she said, oh, Mugu Gai Pan. I'm like, I'll take the Mugu Gai Pan. And that was so good. It was like leeks and this gravy, and oh, it was so good. And then I started eating, like sweet and sour chicken. And then I found out about General Tso's chicken. And then, I would always go in there and say, I'm going to have dinner with the General tonight. So that meant I wanted General Tso's. Oh, and the fried rice and the crab meat, ragnoons, and I was just hooked on Chinese food. So, and you could get like a whole dinner for like a whole lunch for like $3. It was just like so crazy cheap. So I took my son there and nothing was there. I mean, all the bars were still there. In fact, there were more bars than ever before. It was just Main Street. And yeah, there's like one place called the Boot Hill Saloon or something like that, I think it is. But that was like the most popular place. And yeah. So I took him to all these places. We just had a good time. We spent a day there. We drove on the beach and we rented a couple of, we rented this double bicycle. that was a train wreck. You got two people trying to drive a bike. It just doesn't work out. You're like all shaking around and everything, but it was so fun. But I took my son there and wanted to kind of show him a couple of years of my life. But Wild Olive Street was gone. The houses were gone. And they actually bought a couple streets. And like I said, there was this huge, like, sports bar there, like Lobster Shack or something like that. I don't know. But everything was gone. So, yeah, it kind of sucks. But money talks and bull ass walks. So, but anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed these stories. This last one especially, I kind of held off on it. I just didn't. It's kind of hard to talk about. Still is. I mean, even 20 years later almost, it's still, it is. It's over 20 years. Shoot, 25 years now. I mean, it's closer than that. It's what, 2021? Yeah, like 30 years later. So, shows my age, but there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments section. Did you have to go through anything like this? And like I said, I swore when my son was born, the first night that he was born and I was holding him and looking at him in the, his little crib, I'm thinking, I will never do that to you. And I never did, but I wanted to a couple times. Believe me, I was wanting to drop him off at the bus station. Well, in fact, I don't even think there's bus stations anymore, not in the town where I was from. But anyway, let me know down in the comment section. And thanks everybody for listening to me rant for a couple of hours about my life. And I'll have more of these real life stories. And this is just my real life story. I mean, everybody has real life stories, and these things just kind of pop up in my head, and I'll just take a note of it, and I'll eventually just make a video for it. So, but anyways, thanks everybody for watching, and until next video, stay safe.